We're now going into our next session, which is slightly different from our first one. We have some more presentations from our speakers this morning. So we're looking at communities and local authorities working together. So we're looking at some examples of that. And it's good to see that our speakers are in the room with me already. So we have Gillian Dick talking about who worked in stall spaces for Glasgow City Council, Sheena Boyd from new Cumnock Development Trust, and Karlene Doherty from DTAS. So these three are giving us presentations this morning looking at that particular topic. And again, the Q&A, each of them are giving a 10-minute presentation, and then we'll have a Q&A after that. So your questions, put them in the chat box, and we'll take them as the morning proceeds. So Karlene, are you ready with your presentation? Do you have the power? Are you a host?
I believe so, and I'm unmuted, so just give me a second to set this up.
That's it, that's working, smashing.
That's us, yeah?
Yep, all clear.
So, first of all, I'm really pleased to be asked to speak at this session, as I think there's significant potential for local authorities and communities to work more collaboratively to achieve their common goals. And in this case, we're specifically talking about bringing vacant and derelict land and buildings back into use in socially productive ways. In fact, it is exactly this topic that I've been researching over the last 18 months through an action research partnership project between DTAS Scotland and the Scottish Land Commission. The project has supported community-led regeneration of vacant and derelict land, which has involved different levels of collaboration with a number of different local authorities. And so today, I'm going to give a bit of insight into how the project has worked, what has been achieved, and talk you through the key findings of the research, where hopefully you'll be able to see the potential for future uptake within your organisations. So the project has been housed within DTAS Scotland, which is a membership support organisation for community-led regeneration organisations, often called development trusts. The project is focused on working with already established anchor organisations who are embedded within their communities and have the capacity to take projects forward, but until now had lacked the confidence and technical know-how to unlock these sites. The focus has also been on small, prominent sites which can cause a disproportionate level of harm to communities. And these sites are often not seen as a priority by local or national delivery bodies, and they can also hold less potential for market-led regeneration due to the scales of development. So there's a lot of potential for communities to unlock these specific kinds of sites. At the start of the project, communities were asked to identify and propose sites, and I think this is quite important, as I believe that for a project to be truly community-led, we as professionals shouldn't be telling communities what to focus on or what necessarily the solutions are. We aim to focus the support in more deprived communities where projects like this can be less likely to happen off their own back. And we're also seeking to gain as broad a base of learning as possible, as the aim of the project was to develop our understanding of the barriers and solutions for community-led regeneration of vacant and derelict land. As this, we were hoping would enable us to provide case studies to inspire future development, and crucially, to also inform policy, which we hope will enable scaled up action of this kind in the future. I think it's worth noting at this stage that the appetite out there for this kind of support was significant. I'm aware of over 40 community-led groups in Scotland which are actively seeking to bring sites back into use. And of course, that's just the ones that I've spoken to. There will definitely be more out there. All of the groups that were selected had held long-term aspirations to tackle the sites which they put forward, but until some assistance was on offer, they had either not had the capacity or not been or had been knocked back by the landowner on previous attempts to engage. The proposed end uses that are proposed have been they've ranged from some of the more anticipated uses, such as urban green spaces and community gardens, which are fantastic, but they've also ranged to some really ambitious economic and social regeneration projects, and projects which are also designed to meet the climate emergency head on, such as renewable energy regeneration in urban areas, outdoor after school care and low carbon affordable housing. Some of these were brought up in the last session. In fact, also the next speaker that you're going to be hearing from, Sheena, from New Cumnock Development Trust, is one of the groups which have been supported by the project, and they're planning to implement two projects addressing 2 of the long-term vacant buildings in their town, which will deliver much needed economic and social regeneration. Every community that we've been working with has developed their idea from a base of local policy evidence. So where there's already been, these tend to already be in place, such as community action plans, regeneration strategies, or at least sort of place standard conversations. So there's already a base of consultation that they're developing their ideas from. And hopefully with local place plans coming in, local authority attendees can see this as a clear link in how they can support communities to build the evidence base for community-led regeneration. Across all of the groups, different levels of collaboration with both public and private partners has been instrumental to success. So in some cases, that's been about the landowner, be that public or private, allowing the site to be used temporarily to trial an idea and build the business case for capital development. Essentially, by doing that, the groups are de-risking projects for themselves, for funders, and for local authorities who might be looking to collaborate with them. Other types of collaboration has been about merging complementary uses into the one space. This is particularly relevant where we've got larger buildings that we're trying to find solutions for. So there might be a community organisation that can be paired up with a complementary private organisation to bring 2 uses into the one building. In other cases, it's been the more obvious types of collaboration where communities and local authorities have been working together to bring together funding packages from different sectors addressing priority buildings. And I think across the board, what I think is of real value about this type of development is that knowing that when you're collaborating with an embedded anchor organisation, that there is a dedicated end user lined up who's invested in delivering sustainable change within their community. So, as I said at the start, the key aspiration of the project was to learn about the barriers to this type of development and to find solutions to overcoming them, whilst developing knowledge about how policies should be adapted to enable scaled up development of this kind in the future. And we have the first part of that, we have developed a suite of case studies for each of the groups, and these are available on the DTAS and the Scottish Land Commission's website, which you'd be able to share with communities who are thinking about undertaking a project like this themselves, to give them a bit of inspiration and knowledge about what solutions have already been developed to overcome some of the barriers. But what I've listed here on this slide is where I believe that local authorities have a role to play in unlocking the community and local authority collaboration. First of all, providing a supportive environment for spatial planning exercises. As you'll hear from Sheena, who's speaking next, the East Ayrshire approach has been a really good example of this. And there's also a great tool called the CoImpact tool, which has been developed by the Scottish Land Commission. And this can be a good resource to identify how local people can feel about different buildings, and on that basis, prioritise which buildings should be prioritised for development. A further key learning is that the groups need a level of support in early stage funding to get projects like this off the ground. There are some funding pots around to do early stage feasibility work, but these funds aren't always set up for the more complicated sites. And so a bit of investment and resource to support this early stage is needed. Some local authorities notably already have this in place, which is fantastic. And I'd say the key thing is for communities knowing that these funds are there and they're able to access it is also important. And the same can be said for potential collaborative funding bids. Pots like RCGF and the Vacant Land Investment Programme, which are obviously accessed through local authorities, but are encouraged, community-led approaches are encouraged to those funds. Communities aren't always aware of the opportunity to work with a local authority to bid into them. So sharing that knowledge and putting a call out on potentially SCDO's funding finder is a really good idea. And finally, where possible, facilitating meanwhile uses for immediate benefit is obviously something that Gillian is going to speak about, but this also de-risks future development. And I'm talking here about making vacant shops available for pop-up uses, or even underused open spaces like gap sites, or even car parks if they're not used on certain days of the week, both council owned and privately owned, where this can be leveraged. That's me, Ewan.
Thank you very much, Karlene. That was really interesting. I've just been taking some notes down of your last slide there. So that's really some interesting findings and some really nice pointers into our following speakers. So thank you very much for doing an introduction for them. So we'll move on now to Sheena, who Karlene was referred to, and Sheena comes from the new Cumnock Development Trust.
Thanks, Karlene and Ewan for that introduction, and hope I can get across some of the things that we've been doing in New Cumnock. So I work as Business and Development Manager with New Cumnock Development Trust, and I plan to tell you a bit about our organisation, a bit about New Cumnock, and some of the work that we've been doing. So I'll start off with our vision. So this was created in conjunction with the community. It was created during our strategic planning process, which we carried out a couple of years ago now, during COVID. So this kind of sets the scene for what our ambition is really. So the key takeaways that I would like you to take from this presentation really is that New Cumnock has huge potential. New Cumnock Development Trust is a very ambitious organisation on behalf of New Cumnock, and that collaboration partnership maximises community efforts, but we do need policy and practice to support the communities to achieve our vision. So New Cumnock itself is a small rural community in East Ayrshire. It grew on the back of coal mining, various different kinds of mining, in fact, lime, lead and coal mining. So in the 1970s, the deep coal mines closed, but open cast mining continued for a bit longer. In its heyday, the town had grown to support a high street of shops, various other businesses in the local area, providing goods and services to the community and beyond. When the deep coal mines closed, people moved away to find work. Many houses in the post-war housing scheme were demolished. This left vacant areas of land. Just to give you an idea of the decline in population, at the height of its population level, New Cumnock had around 19,000 people living here. And the population fell from about 8,000 in the 1980s to the current level of between 2,500 to 3,000. So over this time, shops and businesses closed, buildings throughout the town became vacant, and several have fallen into poor condition, which I know is a sort of common theme across many places. But we are very fortunate in New Cumnock to have a wonderful landscape, access to outdoor spaces and plenty of fresh air. So it is actually a great place to live and work. In recent years, there have been initiatives and capital works undertaken to address the poor condition of the village centre. So the Community Action Plan, which was created from 2015 to 2019, was successful in taking forward some local improvements and also caught the attention of the Prince's Foundation. So the Prince's Foundation involvement led to the open-air swimming pool in the town centre being refurbished, and the town hall, which is just across the road. As well as this, in recent years, East Ayrshire Council has invested in New Cumnock. The primary school was refurbished, the early learning centre also. And currently work is underway right through the middle of New Cumnock to provide flood defences in the town. So this kind of recent work and investment did boost local confidence and encourage people to look for a better future for their village. So it's a good time really for us to build on that. I'll tell you a bit about the Development Trust itself. We are quite a young organisation. So we were created by the local community council to make the most of community benefit funds. We gained charitable status in 2018. And our work was initially derived from the New Cumnock Regeneration Master Plan. So this was created in conjunction with the community again. It's funded by Scottish Government Making Places Fund and was based on the Understanding Scottish Places model. So it provides a structured and consistent framework for the future development of New Cumnock. So we worked with East Ayrshire Council to give a bit more strength to this master plan and to the wishes of the local people. So the master plan was the starting point for our placemaking plan. People were given opportunities to comment and add to the draft plan, which was created by a chap called John Semple, who worked in planning at East Ayrshire Council at the time. And it was approved in 2020 by Scottish ministers. So our placemaking plan, which is based on the New Cumnock Regeneration Master Plan, is now incorporated into the local development plan as supplementary guidance. So this means that local people's priorities for the development of their town are actually now incorporated into planning considerations. So this is our placemaking map. You'll see on it there are various different colours. The priority buildings are the ones in red, the red squares, and potential development sites. These are buildings also, the yellow ones, but there's also areas for civic space improvements, housing improvements, etc., etc. And these have all been identified by the local community. As well as doing this work and creating the master plan and placemaking map, we've also developed our long-term strategic plan, and this again was created in conjunction with the local community. And as I said at the beginning, we started off with a vision in this presentation that shows just what we're aiming to achieve in the longer term. As well as the strategic plan, we have a 5-year business plan, which provides a bit more detail on several of the ideas that have come out of the master plan. As well as that, we've created various thematic plans. Again, these are developed in conjunction with the community. I was listening to somebody earlier on talking about the consultation fatigue, and we definitely feel a bit like we're inflicting that on our community. So these, I'm going to tell you a bit about these thematic plans just in a moment, two of these. So these are largely focused on dilapidated buildings in New Cumnock. We either own or are in the process of buying these buildings on behalf of the community. Karlene has been helping us with one of them, but has also contributed to the other. The master plan, actually, one of the priorities coming out of it, the main priority was doing something about these dilapidated buildings, not just these ones, but the ones that you saw on the master plan, on the placemaking plan highlighted in red. These two buildings are two of those red squares. So the picture on the top is the Castle Hotel, and we aim to turn that into budget visitor accommodation. So this will provide some employment in the town, and will also encourage visitors to come to the area. The idea behind encouraging visitors to come to the area is that it will provide other economic opportunities for people there to provide additional things that visitors may want to do while they're there. The building underneath, this is the Trotters building, and it's just across the road from the Castle Hotel. They're both in the centre of the town. We intend this building will be used in the main for a reuse hub in New Cumnock. There will be additional things happening in that building as well. There will be opportunities for social space and potentially office space. But this project ultimately will provide training, employment and skills sharing opportunities, as well as social opportunities. And what we've discovered through our various conversations and consultations is that people are looking for the opportunity to socialise, but to socialise with purpose. So those skills sharing opportunities are really coming to the fore, and are very important. So, the reuse hub does sit mostly in the circular economy, but as I was saying, it does lead to all these different things. So it's a really significant development for us. So although our original focus and continuing focus is around dilapidated buildings and finding uses for them, bringing them back into use, at the start of the pandemic, our focus did change very quickly to supporting the community through the emergency. So our efforts were directed at supporting volunteers, local community groups, and local businesses. That focus has continued through the recovery phase, and I use that term quite loosely, recovery. So to work within COVID regulations, we started encouraging opportunities for social interaction through outdoor activities. And this, we very quickly realized, was lifting spirits and building confidence. And we have really now built on that to make a health and wellbeing focus in all of our more short-term activities. We aim to continue this, as well as developing other gateways to social connection and cohesion. We've found that involving people in social activities also provides opportunities for them to take part in planning for the future and contributing to decisions and the control of resources. And this is one of the things that we hope to build on as a countermeasure, I suppose, to that consultation fatigue. I mentioned at the start our vision, and that we're ambitious for New Cumnock. But we do realise that we can't do all of this on our own. We want to work in collaboration with other organisations. We are a young organisation, and this also helps us to learn, avoid some mistakes, and develop our capacity as well. We're increasingly working in collaboration with others, including local groups, DTAS, as Karlene was saying, and our local authority, East Ayrshire Council. We have, over our short life, built up good relationships across several areas of our local authority, and have benefited from a wide access to a range of skills, knowledge, and experience, as well as additional resources. Some of the input we've had from local authority include really hands-on support from Vibrant Communities team, the Cleaner Communities, and East Ayrshire Works. But also input to feasibility studies and some guidance from economic regeneration and corporate services. So all the things that I've talked about, from the buildings through to the outdoor activities, we have had some input, and we are now building on that, actually, particularly in terms of the activities that we started focusing on through COVID and beyond. We're building up relationships through active schools, the Coalfield Communities Landscape Partnership also, and many other activities. Some of our newly started clubs and classes are being supported actively by East Ayrshire Council staff, which makes a massive difference to what we can achieve and what we can actually do. So I will leave it there. I will just finish by saying that sometimes that collaboration can be challenging, not least in terms of the difference in size and agility of the organisations. We're quite small, local authorities quite big, but it is a relationship that we found very productive, and we do intend to continue that and build on that and make the most of it. So I'll leave it there, but I'm happy to answer any questions too.
Thank you very much, Gina. That was excellent and really good example of working with a local authority. We might come back to some of the challenges of disparity of size in the Q&A, and also really interesting. Obviously, we've done events before together, but the fact that as awful as COVID was, some of the learning and activity that arose during COVID has a lot of organisations have carried on delivering things that they were delivering when we were in lockdown, because they've realised that there are also huge long-term advantages from carrying on those activities. So thank you very much for mentioning them. Our final speaker in this session this morning is Gillian Dick from Glasgow City Council. So she's going to give us the local authority perspective, having dealt with the stalled spaces scheme, which many of us will no doubt be familiar with. And Gillian, you've started sharing your screen. It looks successful.
It hopefully does. Let's just see if it does the final wee bit, which is there, and I'll go for it because I can see and hear you. So the thing for this meeting said that I was stalled spaces. I'm actually the Spatial Planning Manager for Research and Development. Stalled spaces started in the development plan group about 13, 14 years ago now as a response to all of the vacant derelict land that was around the city. And it was a way of gathering evidence so that we could feed into our development plan that came a bit later. It then shifted various teams, and it eventually, just prior to the pandemic, came back into the development plan group, where we decided to undertake a review of those 10 years to see what was happening. So the slide that I've given you there just shows you the context in which we're working. We're starting to talk about nature-based solutions because we had funding from the EU for our Connecting Nature project, which made us focus on those nature-based solution themes of making sure that we do no harm to social cohesion, health and well-being, environment, economic and biodiversity, all at the same time for both the human and the habitat and species community. And it's worth just keeping that in mind, because you might discover that the Stalled Spaces programme in Glasgow was maybe ahead of the curve slightly. So just to focus your mind and bring you back to that Scottish theme, it's always been about place. Patrick Geddes 100 years ago in Edinburgh said it was about the right people in the right place at the right time. Jane Jacobs, talking about New York, said if you didn't like a place, why would you fight for it? And we kind of encompass that now in the place standard, which you can see on the right hand side. Great tool for communities. It's been designed with communities in mind, whether that's a professional community or a community of folk that just live in a street. There's now a children's version and a climate version, and I would commend it to you as a way to start a conversation. That you don't need to have a planning degree that I have to have a conversation about place, and it validates that conversation, and it means that it allows people from different perspectives to be on the same page, excuse me, and talking the same language. So, Stalled Spaces in Glasgow started in 2010. We thought we better start reviewing it because everybody was saying it was successful, it was winning prizes, it was doing all kinds of things, but we had very limited money, no resources, and we had a real fear that we were setting up communities to fail, or we were being the lifeblood or the kind of mothership for it, and we weren't actually letting our children or our spaces and our communities actually grow and learn and lean on each other. So we looked at what the Stalled Spaces programme was meant to do. It was meant to improve the environment, create an economic uplift, improve that health and well-being, improve that social cohesion, benefit biodiversity. Oh, hang on a minute. Isn't that what nature-based solutions is meant to do? Here's a handy diagram on the right that the IUCN did when they looked at nature-based solutions across the whole of the world. And they've kind of come up with a standard. And as you can see, it's about the challenges that society faces. It's about looking at designing at scale, whether that's small scale or large scale, and how you can roll that out across a bigger place. It's about understanding the trade-offs that you have to make, that you really want some economic viability or feasibility, you want some biodiversity net gain, and you want to kind of take the communities with you. So you want that inclusive governance. You want to be adaptive as you go, and then ultimately you want to mainstream that in order to make it sustainable. So a lot of the projects that we've done, a lot of the stuff we've done on Stalled Spaces have been about the planning and delivery, and none of it has been about the stewardship and the long-term sustainability of that action that those communities have taken. And that means that as a public authority, we are failing those communities and we are failing everybody else. If all that we do, whether we're the Scottish Government, whether we're the key agencies, or whether we're the council, is provide funding for planning and delivery and don't look at how we can support those communities to sustain the stewardship of what they've created and allow it to grow and breathe. So we looked at the positive benefits. We had over 125 sites. They amplified the resilience of those communities. They amplified the ability to be agile and move quickly, and they amplified social cohesion. That became even more evident as we went into lockdown and the way that people could do things. Now, the impact of that lockdown meant that some communities could continue to do that, bring that positive impact, and it increased the value of communities. So the more agile ones could keep going, but some of the ones that were less agile or more fragile they didn't manage to deliver their projects, or they weren't in a position to actually bid for any funding or move forward. So lockdown amplified both ends of that coin. The ones that were able to keep going did amazing jobs. The ones that didn't, their projects folded. So what lockdown also showed us was there was particular within our high density inner cities, there was concern expressed about the ability to access good quality open space, that if you lived in a tenement building like I did, there's 9 houses accessing a very small community space. At the height of lockdown, I didn't feel safe going into my back green. I opened my window and sat at the window on a chair, or I went into public open spaces, because 9 families, if you multiply that by 4, trying to use a space that is maybe 10 meters by 10 meters, didn't feel safe when you were being told you had to have 2 meters between you. And lots of communities felt that, and we're starting to look more agile ones about reclaiming some of the vacant derelict land that was around and just using it. And the more resilient communities went, we'll do not ask, and then we'll respond to people saying, why did you do that? And we'll have that conversation at that point. Whereas our less resilient communities went, we need to find out who we have to ask first. So they spent so much time trying to find out who they could ask that they lost the momentum and lost the moment. So what we have had over the last 2 years is spaces temporarily reclaimed by people. The agile ones have just reclaimed them and got on with them. We've got businesses reimagining and reinventing themselves and looking for opportunities and becoming more risk aware and not risk averse. And we've got other spaces that nature and species have reclaimed, which has been welcomed by the communities. However, we have communities that need more support. They need support and encouragement to engage and take those opportunities. They need to know that it will increase their social cohesion, that doing this can improve their health and well-being and can have a positive impact on the environment in which they live and work. So we undertook a review. We used our Connecting Nature framework that's been developed in the project that says, let's have a look at the technical solutions, the governance, the financing of business, the entrepreneurship, the co-production or collaboration with communities. Do we provide ourselves and the communities time to reflect on what went well, what went wrong, and have they learned from that? And what's the impact and monitoring we're doing of the assessment? That review said that we had 3 stages in the stored spaces projects. We had the planning stage where we initiated it and tried to get it to grow. We had the delivering stage where we tried to embed it. And then we had the stewardship stage where we tried to mature it. And the stewardship stage has been the weakest point of all of this, because as I said at the start, you'll always find money for planning and delivery. It's the funding for that stewardship. So in the review of the stuff that happened over the 10 years, here's a summary of what we've come up with, which hopefully can help us develop better projects and a different iteration of stored spaces. So you need to review the alignment with statutory planning, need to assess how nature-based solutions are assessed and how we embed things. What was good was we had a branding and a website. We haven't kept that website up to date, so it's maybe not so good now. And we realized during lockdown that we needed to align more effectively with the third sector organizations that were more resilient and were area based and could act as a go-between between the council and the communities and stop us doing constant consultation and could give us the information they already had. We needed to revisit the arts and events strand to ensure it was community embedded, because we were picking up a lot of arts funding that was just one person of a community of one doing an arts intervention for a day because they were agile and they had bank accounts and all the rest of it. We had to look at the governance and reporting lines and how we communicated what was going on. There's a strong case for trying to mature and develop nature-based businesses and giving people an opportunity to understand what the business opportunities were, whether that was not-for-profit or whether it was actually a business that would sustain what they were doing. And we needed to come in with tools for that. We needed to understand better participatory budgeting and the opportunities that would give and how we could get communities tying into that. We needed to work more closely with our economic development third sector to look at community enterprises and innovate ideas and nurture them. And we need to develop true partnerships with communities that work, and this is a Glasgow thing, Glasgow has identified community engagement officers, but the focus is on bins and cleanliness rather than the community engagements. We need to widen that perspective. We need to develop that knowledge exchange and peer-to-peer between various communities, because sometimes the communities do know best and can help other communities. And we need to kind of take away the barriers that said things like you need a bank account, you need a governance structure, etc. I am going to go very quickly. Hopefully this will be shared and you'll see some of the other points about looking at the bumps in the road and it being okay to fail, and actually collecting that information and data on maps so you can visualize it, and not on Excel spreadsheets, and not on PDFs, and not on the back of a fag packet, and not in a Word doc, because actually that makes it very hard for people to find that information. Story maps are a great thing, and we're trying to work on creating story maps with some of our third sector that collects the ideas that communities have and plays it back to them, and we're working on that. And CoImpact, which I will introduce you to, launching on the 16th, is a tool to identify the outcomes you want for the projects that you have, and will help communities, whether it's a small community or a community like the one I work in, to actually figure out what outcomes do we need, what data can we have to measure that, and who do we need to go and ask to get hold of that data. Very quickly, all of this should be tying into the National Planning Framework, which is still out for consultation till the 31st of March, and is the part 1 of the development plan. So if you don't like your local authority's development plan now, that's the document you should be objecting to, because we won't be able to change that in our local development plans. We have to have a good reason to change the policies. So please take the time to have a look at it. Very quickly, we're using all of this to embed in our open space strategy and use some of this data to look at how we can unlock the vacant derelict land and change it into permanent open spaces. But in order to do that, we need data. We need to understand how those vacant derelict land or those temporary stalled spaces deliver on a livable, healthy and resilient community, and also a multifunctional. And you can see the questions we're asking ourselves is about retaining, where do we find new open space, how do we redefine open space, and what do we do with the redundant, and some of that will be swapping it out for the vacant and derelict land that's in a better location. We're using this Connecting Nature framework to do that, and we're trying to link our development plan to the place efficiency assessment, the open space strategy, forest and woodland, and it's all about the evidence. And the community saying we want to use our vacant and derelict land, we want these stalled spaces, is brilliant evidence of a lived experience, and that's what we need to curate. We're experimenting with it in Drumchapel, in that we've managed to get our hands on 150k of our vacant and derelict land funding to look at Drumchapel in a different way, and look at how we can take a place-based approach with the community to use that vacant and derelict land to help us adapt to climate, to provide better habitat, to provide opportunities for delivering better and more coherent walking, cycling, opportunities for recreation and open space, and mitigate that climate and create a better space, but working with the communities to do that. We're gathering all this kind of evidence. I am rounding up now, Ewan, because I'm sure I have rattled on for far too long, but it's all about the evidence that you can get to show you that social cohesion, the environment, economic, biodiversity things, and how you can make better decisions about what you do with that land. We're talking to lots of people and trying to get their evidence as well. And we're using that to have a look at how we understand those spaces and places, and feeding into open space and place efficiency. And there is, again, last call, there is a consultation out on open space and place efficiency, closes on the 31st of March, and it's asking us to look at development maintenance and use of those spaces. So again, if you want to change things, please take the time to have a look at that. That's me, and I'll stop sharing.
Thank you very much, Gillian. You did go over time, but it was very interesting. And as the local authority person in the room, we're all really interested to know what it is like from a local authority perspective. And I think the fact that you were able to talk about the review, that you've done a review, is really quite fascinating. And one of the questions is that review available? Is it published anywhere that we can access it? Or
I will need to check. I think we put it up with a committee report. So if it's up with the committee report, I'll find the link to the committee report and fire it on. If not, I can share it with you, because it's a document that we used and then reported on. So yeah, I can certainly share that with you. Because
it's the review looks really totally fascinating. The fact that you're identifying where problems have existed within the scheme and how to overcome them. The concentration on or the need for concentration on stewardship is excellent. And I think that your point that I think has gone over a lot of people's heads is NPF4 is the new LDP. And it's the one ring to rule them all. And we need to make sure that NPF4 is a good thing. So thank you very much to all three of our speakers. You may have noticed some comments in the chat, and I suppose this is one of the really interesting things about having good case studies represented both from a local authority and from the community projects that we've heard from as well, is that undoubtedly people will come back and say, it's not like that where I live. And I suppose one of the reasons that the Land Commission are having this discussion today is because while we know that there are good case studies, it's not even across Scotland, and communities are coming into discovering problems with their local authorities. So I suppose from your perspective, I suppose I shared a couple of questions with you yesterday, and it picks up on what our audience is also saying in the chat. What is it that makes what capacity does a local authority have to be able to provide that capacity and enabling resource for communities?
Oh, big question. If you are from the Scottish Government or others or political, cover your ears now. More people and more resources that are skilled, because at the minute we're doing a disservice to our local communities. There's a whole load of place plan stuff coming over the horizon, and any community can decide to do a place plan. And we will have a responsibility to provide them with the right information that allows them to give us something back that is legitimate under the planning regulations. There would be nothing worse than us giving the wrong information to those communities and then saying, no, that doesn't fit with the planning, we can't take cognizance of it, you need to go away. And communities saying, what? But we need to give lots of support to communities. Sheena described what New Cumnock had done in their place plan. The council she sits in are one of the front runners about trying to get local place plans and one of the pilot, but it took a heck of a lot of resources to do it and provide it. So it would be really easy for us to send communities to the council website and say, go and have a look at that. And what we would get back probably from some communities is a local place plan that said, we want more dog walking, more bins and less dog muck. And a lot of that has nothing to do with local plans, and we can't do anything about it. What we want is them looking at our map data on open spaces, our map data on economic development, and giving us the evidence that allows us to rezone sites for the community's benefit. But that needs support. And the other bit that's in, just giving communities money and going, there you go, away you go, doesn't make them resilient and actually sets them up to fail. Because if they don't have the support network, we set up stalled spaces and said, you need a bank account, you need a governance structure, and you need to do certain things to get a bank account as a charity or as, and the banks are getting harder to do that. So you can access it. But we also found there was some community groups that gone through that process and then just thought they could rely year on, year out on the Stalled Spaces programme. So the last one before the pandemic, one group applied for £900 for a fence, when quite frankly, they could have gone and skip dived and got some free wood, and all they needed was £5 for a box of nails and somebody to show them how to build a fence. They didn't need £900 from us to employ somebody to build a fence. So it was getting ridiculous. So we need to be more aware of how resilient or otherwise our communities are and what support those communities need, and put that into place.
Okay, thanks very much, Gillian. Karlene and Sheena, do you have any comments on what it is that local authorities need to improve their own capacity? Karlene.
Oh, sorry, I jumped in front of you, Sheena. But yeah, I think I would mirror a lot of what Gillian said about resource. I think there does need to be a resource that communities can access that supports them to achieve their ambitions, that resource that will work with but not necessarily do for, so that they can build their own capacity as they go, but not have it prescripted to them. So that's support, but also, as I touched on when I was speaking, some financial assistance to get early stage interventions off the ground, because what we've seen on especially like derelict sites is that if you're able to do small interventions, then that gets people's attention that something's changing, that change is possible, that they can actually have an impact, and therefore more people are interested in then getting involved, and that builds the capacity and the resilience of a community organisation, because there's more people getting involved. So I think, yeah, that's the resource and small amounts of funding to get things off the ground, and to act as a supportive partner is just a big thing. Something that I think Sheena might talk about more as well, but when Sheena mentioned the economies of, not the economies of scale, but the differences in organisations, that's a very frustrating thing to try and navigate for community organisations who are maybe funded for 3 years. At the start of that 3 year, they think, right, now's the time to launch our big plan. But when working with large organisations like the council that have set processes that take a large proportion of that time, that undermines the sustainability of, or the feasibility of ideas. Yeah, so I think in terms of local authorities recognising that and potentially being able to mitigate that and work a wee bit differently, to recognise that not everyone works in the same way as them.
Right, okay. What about you? These are good points, Karlene, and they're definitely reflecting comments that we've got in the chat, but also picking up on what Gillian said. Sheena, I mean, your experience is obviously good, but with challenges. How do you, what need, for people who just have the challenges, local authorities that are just offering the challenge or just presenting challenges, what would you say needs to change? What could they learn from the work you've done with a local authority?
So yeah, I would agree with Karlene in terms of the size. The agility is a big thing, but I think what we've found with East Ayrshire Council is that they are beginning, the different departments within the council are beginning to talk to each other and work together. I think that's a big thing. So I mentioned that we worked with planning through the placemaking process, place plan and place map. But they did, planning actually spoke to vibrant communities, which is like the community facing part of the local authority, to help them with how to engage with the community in that process. So things like that, with the departments actually beginning to talk to each other. Certainly in terms of East Ayrshire Council, they do have this team, Vibrant Communities, which is very community facing, and they obviously get the experience and the training to deal with that. So engaging a team like that with every other part of the council could be helpful. I do also wonder, and this doesn't happen as far as I know yet, although there might be some volunteer programs around it, but one of the things that I've been thinking recently is it might be helpful at some point to do some kind of exchange, whether it's volunteers and staff or staff and staff. So maybe people from the local authority could come and shadow or work in Cumnock Development Trust, and trustees, staff from our organisation can go and work just for a week or a day even, just to try and get that real hands-on for what real life is on the other side of the fence, both ways, because there is, as well as local authorities needing to understand how they have to change and support communities, it would be helpful to have that additional understanding from the community perspective of what the difficulties are within a local authority and why things perhaps are a certain way, and those relationships and that kind of crossover potentially could help find solutions that work for both sides.
That's a very, as Kathy said in the chat, that's a very interesting idea. I mean, I suppose I'm aware of actually public bodies and government swapping staff around and people gaining experience in that way, but it happening at a different scale. I would agree, until you've really experienced something, you don't really know how it works, and I think that is actually quite a valuable suggestion in that. I suppose one of the things that you've touched on it, Sheena, but one of the things that's coming out to me quite clearly in the chat is that internal division within council directorates being problematic. And Gillian, you as a planner, you're trained to do community engagement and chat to everyone, and planners training, even though it's not always delivered totally smoothly, but they're trained to engage with communities. And that's really what planning is based on. Other bits of the local authority aren't. So what needs to happen to make those other bits of the, and I suppose it's economic development or whoever controls estates, for them to take the same approach? What change has to take place? I
think that, and I would say it from a planning point of view, the planning stuff and the local development plan needs to be at the heart of the council, because that's its asset management plan. It's the asset management plan for the spaces and the buildings, regardless of whether we own them or not. The problem is at the minute, I think a lot of councils still see the planning service as the development management application processing department, and therefore you get a reinventing of the wheel. So Glasgow is huge, it's big. We're only now getting our heads around the fact that there's a difference between teams that do policies and strategies and teams that do delivery, and actually the policy and strategy teams might be able to help the delivery teams deliver better and get on the front foot. But we also have a whole layering, so the city region stuff is distracting some of our colleagues, and it's a growth industry at the minute. The local place plans are coming over the horizon, and if you're East Ayrshire, they've got their heads around it, and the planning service are talking to community planning and have understood what each thing do. But I think in some councils, the confusion is there because community planning and planning, as a planner, I would say it's the same thing, because it's all about a space and a place, and something always happens in a geographical location. But sometimes people don't get that. And I think the more that we can show that multiple things happen in the same geographical location, and use things like GIS and story maps and that visualization, rather than writing War and Peace in words and reports, the more we can show that multifaceted layering. And I noticed in the chat, when I was going to pick up, somebody was saying, the land wasn't on the VDL and it was on the housing. Well, actually, within a development plan, if land isn't developed but has a development potential, it's entirely up to the council whether they stick it on the VDL or not. But they may well be being told by the person who owns the land, I'm just about to develop it, I'm doing a feasibility study, I'm doing this, I'm doing that. A lot of that land is held as a mortgageable asset for development elsewhere in the UK or the world. And those companies want an asset on their books, which is the land value of housing or economic, and the land value of open space or community space. That valuation has to change from a negative asset to a positive asset. We can change that as a planning service with our asset management plan, which is our local development plan, which we're now doing collaboratively with the Scottish Government. We might then be able to change the conversations and get some people to the table within the organisations. At the minute, when everything's focused on economic development, sometimes that's the key driver, and that's where we need to change some of those key drivers as well. Silos are a wonderful thing, but they're dark, dank, horrible, black places, and I want out of it. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much. But as your comments on where the local development plan sits within the local authority is mirrored in discussions that everyone's having around NPF4 and where it sits in relation to Scotland, because if it is the one ring to rule them all, it needs to really maybe have a higher status actually within Scotland as a whole, and other strategies should be pivoting off that or reflecting what's actually agreed in NPF4. The fact that the Parliament is signing off NPF4 is going to be quite interesting.
Yeah, I would completely agree with you, Ewan. We as a planner, we've tried to kind of, it's why we started in Glasgow referring to it as the City Council's asset management plan. Yeah. If you want one plan with one truth about what we're doing with the land and buildings, that's where you go. And if our colleagues won't tell us what they're doing, then that undermines that plan. And that's where we need Scottish Government and others to emphasise that. And each council's local development plan should be the one form of truth about the land and the buildings within that authority's area. And I think the NPF4 and some of the mapping that Scottish Government's trying to do is trying to link all of that together so that you have that one form of truth, that you've got the NPF4 and then you've got the 34 development plans that visualize that is what they're aiming for, but we've got to get those policies right if it's ever going to work.
I should declare an interest in that. I'm not a planner. I did study urban planning, which may show why I'm keen for planning to have a higher status. But I'm not an active planner, so but I do think it would be beneficial. Karlene, do you have any other observations to make around, I suppose, the fact that some of the comments in the chat are reflecting those divisions within local authorities? Do you have other examples of where different departments within the local authority have worked well together to enable asset transfer or community ownership?
Not, but yes, there are, but I can't.
Yes,
I can think of examples from other types of projects, like developing active travel options, where you've had to get communities wanting to develop a path that they've brought to, and the council facilitated that by having the team that will potentially adopt that path with the transport engineers and the community around the table, so that it can be constructive conversations in one place and reach agreement, so it's not, yeah, that it could be a more constructive conversation throughout the design period. And that's exactly the kind of thing that, yeah, is helpful in unlocking progress. Right, okay, thanks very much. Were there any, because there's been quite a lot of chat, I've not been able to keep on top of it, but I can see that Sheena, people are, Judy's come in with your job swap type thing being a really volunteer exchange being a very good idea, but obviously there's still people commenting on that sort of division within different local authorities, and Shona has shared the link to the People Make Glasgow Communities, which is a portal for assets to be used by the community, which is, again, it's that sort of thing, showing things to the public. We have 3 minutes left. On the basis of the discussion that we've had so far, is there anything, any final comments anybody wants to make from your particular perspective around working with public authorities? Sheena, you first and then Gillian.
From a community's perspective, I think it's not always clear why people should be interested in things. So NPF4, for example, that will not be on anybody's radar at community level, generally speaking, but it is so important. It will have massive influence for a very long time, but it is not on anybody's agenda. So local authorities surely will have a key place in disseminating that information, helping people understand why it's important and what different things that you need to consider and what will make your community the place that you want to live in 10 years time, 20 years time. And that at the moment, I think communities are being asked to make decisions and contribute views and say how they want things to be without actually having that information to be able to make informed choices and put informed views across.
Thanks very much. I think it's a very good point. It is an important thing, but it will be remote to some people, and because it's a professional and it's a technical and legal document, so that does bring challenges in making it accessible to many. Gillian.
I was just going to say there are lots of resources on council website. I've just put something up, but it's obviously not kind of grabbed all the links. But if you look at the kind of listing and search on Glasgow's website, for instance, you'll find all this information. I know where it is because I'm a professional planner, and lots of councils' websites are a mess. But if you know what you're looking for, but a lot of these are story maps and they're information that communities can drill down in really, really easily. But you need to know where to find them to do that. What I'll do is I'll send through the link with the proper links so it can be shared, just so people can see, and then they can maybe look in their own areas for similar things if you know what you're looking for.
Okay. Thank you very much. It's past. Thank you very much to Gillian, Karlene and Gina for sharing with your experience and your expertise in this particular topic. And I think what's come out really clearly to me is the need for resource within local authorities to enable capacity building within communities, which is a hard ask, but it is, as Gillian, you keep saying, the truth. The truth is these things need resource. Community collaboration and community empowerment isn't the cheap option. It's the good long-term sustainable option, but it does need resourced, and we need to make sure that everyone is resourced at all points to do that. So thank you very much for your contributions and your presentations this morning, and thank you to the audience for your questions and the very lively chat that was happening.